There are moments in this long journey of life when everything you have built with all your heart, your effort, and your years suddenly vanishes like smoke in a morning breeze, leaving behind a vast, echoing emptiness in your soul. It feels as though the entire world has collapsed upon your shoulders, leaving you standing alone amidst the ruins of your own dreams, your finances, your relationships, or even your status. In those quiet, painful hours of the night, when the mind is heavy with sorrow, the questions keep coming back, asking why this happened to you, and how you can ever find your way back to the surface when you are drowning in a sea of despair. It is a profound, shattering experience, one that makes the heart grow weary, and makes the light of hope seem so distant, almost impossible to reach again. Yet, it is precisely in this deep darkness, where everything seems completely lost, that the beautiful seeds of true, unshakable peace can begin to take root if you only know how to look at the landscape of your life through a different, gentler lens. The teachings of the ancient sages, and the timeless wisdom left by the fully awakened one, show everyone that what you call losing everything is often just a profound, dramatic turning point in the deeper story of your consciousness. When you look at a tree in the autumn, you see it shedding every single leaf, standing completely bare, vulnerable, and cold against the harsh winter sky, looking as though it has lost all its glory and life. But the tree does not weep, it does not panic, because it understands in its silent, deep wisdom that shedding those leaves is the only way to conserve its energy, to protect its core, and to prepare for a magnificent, fresh rebirth when the warmth of spring arrives. Humans, however, often cling so tightly to the leaves of wealth, reputation, possessions, and external validation, forgetting that these things are merely temporary decorations, not the essence of who they truly are. In the ancient times, during the lifetime of the enlightened master, there was a respected and immensely wealthy merchant named Anathapindika, whose name meant the one who gives alms to the poor, a man known throughout the entire land for his boundless generosity and pure heart. He had dedicated his vast fortune to building the beautiful Jetavana monastery, buying the land with gold coins until every inch of the ground was covered, purely to create a sanctuary where seekers of truth could find peace. But life, with its unpredictable currents of cause and effect, brought unexpected economic disasters to the region, and through a series of sudden misfortunes, including floods that swept away his hidden treasures and business partners who could not pay their debts, this noble man lost absolutely everything. The immense wealth that once defined his social standing was completely gone, leaving his large house empty, his kitchen bare, and his family reduced to eating the simplest, coarsest grains of rice mixed with sour gruel. Yet, those who visited his home during this period of extreme poverty noticed something extraordinary, something that defied the usual logic of human behavior. There was no bitterness in his voice, no anger in his eyes, and the atmosphere of peace, hospitality, and serene joy that had always filled his home remained entirely unchanged. When friends asked him how he could remain so calm, so radiant with inner light when he had lost everything that gave him power and comfort, he smiled and replied that he had only lost his material wealth, which was merely a temporary loan from the earth, but he had not lost his inner treasury of virtue, his peace of mind, and his devotion to the truth. He understood that his external losses did not diminish the quality of his soul, and by refusing to let his mind become poor, he remained the richest man in the kingdom, a man whose peace could not be stolen by the shifting tides of financial fortune. When you lose everything, the mind naturally enters a state of deep mourning, grieving not just for the physical objects or the people that are gone, but for the identity you had built around those things. You used to be a successful professional, a wealthy entrepreneur, a partner in a beautiful relationship, or someone whom everyone looked up to, and when those roles are stripped away, you feel completely naked, exposed, and utterly helpless. But this painful stripping away is actually a rare, sacred opportunity to discover the gold that lies hidden beneath the dirt of your attachments. It forces you to ask the ultimate question, the question of who you are when you have nothing left to show the world, when there are no titles, no bank accounts, and no applause to sustain your ego. True peace does not come from accumulating things that can be lost, because any peace that depends on external conditions is always unstable, always haunted by the hidden fear of loss. If your happiness is built on the foundation of your money, your physical beauty, your social position, or the constant presence of another person, you will always live with a subtle, underlying anxiety, knowing that a single accident, an economic crash, or a change of heart can destroy your entire world in a moment. The peace that the enlightened ones talk about is an entirely different kind of peace, a peace that arises naturally from within when you stop grasping, when you let go of the illusion of ownership, and when you realize that you are the vast sky, not the passing clouds that drift across it. Think of a small bird perched on a slender, fragile branch of a tree during a great, roaring storm. The wind blows with immense force, shaking the branch violently, threatening to break it at any second, yet the little bird does not panic, it does not cry out in terror, and it does not desperately try to hold on to the shaking wood. It sits there, calm and serene, because its confidence does not reside in the strength of the branch, but in the power of its own wings, knowing that if the branch breaks, it can simply fly up into the open air. When you find your inner wings, which are your awareness, your resilience, and your innate spiritual capacity, you no longer depend on the external branches of life to support your happiness, and even if those branches snap completely, you remain free, whole, and perfectly at peace. There is another beautiful, old account from the historical records of the great teachers, concerning a young woman named Kisa Gautami, who experienced the ultimate, most devastating loss that a human heart can endure. She had lost her young, beautiful child, the single light of her life, the center of her universe, and the shock was so incredibly profound that her mind refused to accept the reality of death. She carried the lifeless body of her little boy from house to house through the village, weeping, begging her neighbors for medicine that could revive her child, but everyone looked at her with pity and sorrow, realizing she had lost her sanity along with her precious son. Eventually, a wise old man, seeing her boundless grief and wanting to guide her gently toward the light of truth, suggested that she should go to the mountain where the Buddha was staying, as he was the only physician who possessed the medicine she truly needed. With her heart trembling with hope, she ran to the master, laid the cold body of her child at his feet, and cried out, begging him to give her the medicine that would bring her son back to life. The enlightened one looked at her with eyes full of infinite compassion, a gaze that understood the depths of human suffering, and he did not give her a dry, intellectual lecture on impermanence, nor did he tell her to stop crying. Instead, he spoke to her in a very soft, soothing voice, telling her that he could indeed prepare the medicine, but he required a single ingredient to make it work, which was a handful of mustard seeds. Her eyes lit up with sudden joy, and she turned to leave immediately to gather the seeds, but the master added a small, essential condition, stating that the mustard seeds must come from a home where no child, no husband, no parent, and no friend had ever died. Filled with a desperate energy, Kisa Gautami went to the first house in the village, asking for the mustard seeds, and the people willingly offered them to her, but when she asked if anyone had died in that household, they sighed, tears coming to their eyes, and told her that the living were few, but the dead were very many, for they had lost their beloved grandfather just the year before. She apologized, left the house, and went to the next door, and then the next, walking through the entire city, from the grand palaces of the rich to the small huts of the poor, but everywhere she went, she encountered the same sorrowful answer. In one house, a daughter had passed away, in another, a husband had been taken by illness, and in another, a loyal servant had died, for there was not a single home, not a single family, that had not been touched by the cold hand of loss. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the earth, and the darkness of evening crept in, Kisagami sat down by the side of the road, watching the flickering lights of the city dim and die out one by one. In that quiet, contemplative moment, her mind suddenly opened, the heavy cloud of illusion lifted from her awareness, and she realized the profound, universal truth that she was not alone in her suffering, that loss is an inescapable part of the human condition, and that death is a path that all living beings must walk. She understood that her intense grief was born from her attachment, from her desire to possess and hold on to something that was naturally subject to change and decay. She returned to the Master, no longer asking for a miracle to change the laws of nature, but asking for the true medicine of wisdom, the path that leads to a peaceful heart that can accept reality exactly as it is, without resistance. When you hear this story, you realize that your personal losses, no matter how unique and devastating they feel to you, are part of the collective fabric of human existence. Every person you see walking down the street, no matter how happy or successful they appear on the outside, carries their own hidden scars, their own history of heartbreak, and their own experiences of losing things that mattered to them. When you understand this deeply, your heart naturally shifts from a state of isolated, self-pitying misery into a state of profound empathy and connection with all of humanity. You no longer ask why this happened to you, but you begin to look at others with greater kindness, gentleness, and understanding, recognizing that everyone is fighting a hard, silent battle of their own. Losing everything can be seen as a great, necessary fire that burns away all the false creations of your life, leaving behind only that which is truly indestructible. When a forest fire rages through a valley, it looks like an absolute tragedy, a terrible destruction of life and beauty, as the towering trees, the vibrant bushes, and the green canopies are reduced to black ash and charcoal. But if you return to that same valley a year later, you will see a miraculous transformation taking place, for the fire has cleared away the old, dead brush, it has enriched the soil with vital nutrients, and it has allowed the sunlight to reach the forest floor, triggering the growth of magnificent, new wild flowers and strong, resilient saplings that would never have had the chance to grow in the dense, crowded shade of the past. Your life operates under the very same natural laws, and the losses you experience, though painful, are often the clearing of the path for something much deeper, truer, and more beautiful to emerge from the fertile ground of your being. The great secret to finding peace after loss lies in the profound art of acceptance, which is not a passive, helpless surrender to defeat, but a brave, active embrace of the present reality. When you lose something valuable, the mind often gets trapped in a destructive loop of resistance, constantly wishing that things were different, replaying the past in your head, and torturing yourself with endless thoughts of what you could have done or should have done to prevent the disaster. This internal resistance is the true source of your suffering, because while the loss itself is a painful event, your refusal to accept that the event has happened is what keeps the pain alive, turning it into a chronic, agonizing misery that poisons your daily life. There was once an old, wise spiritual practitioner who lived a solitary, simple life in a small cottage near a bustling village, and he was deeply respected by the local people for his unwavering calmness and serenity, regardless of what happened around him. One day, a beautiful, young woman from the village gave birth to a child out of wedlock, which was considered a great, deeply shameful scandal in that conservative community, and when her angry parents demanded to know who the father was, she pointed in fear and desperation to the innocent, old practitioner living on the hill. The parents, filled with rage and indignation, marched up to his cottage, shouting insults, accusing him of hypocrisy, and dumped the newborn baby into his arms, demanding that he take responsibility for his actions. The old master did not argue, he did not get angry, and he did not try to defend his immaculate reputation. He simply looked at the child, smiled gently, and said that this is so, and he immediately began to take care of the infant with the utmost tenderness and love. For a whole year, his reputation was completely ruined. The villagers who used to revere him now looked at him with contempt, stopped bringing him food, and whispered cruel things behind his back, yet he remained perfectly at peace, spending his days washing blankets, begging for milk, and rocking the baby to sleep with a heart full of pure, unconditional devotion. He had lost his honor, his standing, and his quiet lifestyle in a single day, but his inner joy was not disturbed in the slightest, because he accepted the reality of the present moment without a single word of complaint or resistance. A year later, overwhelmed by intense guilt and remorse, the young woman finally confessed to her parents that she had lied, and that the real father was a young man from the neighborhood. The parents were filled with horror at what they had done, and they rushed back up the hill, bowing low, weeping, begging for his forgiveness, and asking to take the child back home. The old master did not ask for an apology. He did not express any anger for the injustice he suffered. He simply handed the baby back to them, smiled warmly, and said that this is so, returning immediately to his quiet life of solitary meditation as if nothing had ever happened. This beautiful story illustrates the immense power of a mind that is totally aligned with the present moment, a mind that does not cling to labels, to reputations, or to possessions, but simply flows with the changing tides of life like water flowing over stones. When you can look at your life, even in the midst of a great crisis, and say with deep sincerity that this is how things are right now, you instantly break the chains of suffering, because you stop fighting against the universe. You accept that the money is gone, the relationship has ended, or the position has been lost, and from that clear, calm space of total acceptance, you can begin to see your next steps with absolute clarity, unburdened by the heavy weight of regret, anger, or despair. True peace is never found by looking backward, trying to reconstruct a past that no longer exists, but by planting your feet firmly in the soil of the present, and looking forward with hope, trust, and an open heart. The past is like a faded photograph, an echo that has already vanished into the silence, and no amount of wishing, crying, or fighting can ever bring it back to life, so why waste your precious energy trying to live in a graveyard? The present moment, no matter how difficult or challenging it appears, is the only place where you are truly alive, the only place where you can make a choice, and the only place where the bright light of peace can shine. When you lose everything, you also lose the heavy baggage of expectations, fears, and illusions that you have been carrying for so many years without even realizing it. In many ways, having everything can be a form of golden imprisonment, because you become a slave to your own success, constantly worrying about how to protect what you have, how to acquire more, and how to maintain the image you have presented to society. You spend your days building higher walls around your house, installing security systems, and analyzing your bank accounts, living in a constant state of subtle paranoia, always fearing the day when your fortress might fall. But when the fortress does fall, and everything is swept away by the wind, you are suddenly, miraculously free from that burden, and you can breathe deeply for the very first time in your life. It is like a traveler who has been walking up a steep, exhausting mountain road for days, carrying a massive, incredibly heavy backpack filled with rocks that he believes are precious treasures, sweating, panting, and aching with every single step. Suddenly, he trips over a root, stumbles forward, and his backpack falls off his shoulders, rolling down the deep cliff into the abyss below, completely out of reach forever. His initial reaction is one of absolute horror, shock, and intense grief, as he cries out for the loss of his heavy burden, believing that his life is ruined without it. But as he stands up, straightens his back, and takes a deep, clear breath of the fresh mountain air, he notices a strange, wonderful sensation, for his shoulders are light, his body feels weightless, his fatigue has vanished, and he can now walk up the rest of the mountain with absolute ease, joy, and freedom, looking at the beautiful scenery around him rather than staring at his feet. This is the great paradox of loss, that by losing what you thought you needed, you often find what you were truly searching for all along, which is freedom, simplicity, and a light heart. You realize that you do not need a massive amount of material wealth or social approval to be happy, and that the simplest things in life, a beautiful sunrise, a warm cup of water, the sound of the wind through the trees, or a kind word from a stranger, can bring a depth of joy that money can never buy. You begin to appreciate the richness of the present moment, rather than constantly projecting your happiness into a distant, uncertain future. The enlightened teachers always emphasize that the nature of all conditioned things in this universe is impermanent, constantly changing, and subject to decay, and that trying to find lasting peace in them is like trying to build a beautiful palace on a shifting foundation of sand. Everything that has a beginning must have an end, every meeting must eventually lead to a parting, and every rise must be followed by a fall, for this is the eternal, unchanging law of existence. When you understand this law deeply, you no longer expect the world to be permanent, you no longer get shocked when things change, and you learn to enjoy the beautiful gifts of life while they are here, without grasping onto them as if they belong to you forever. There was an ancient king who wanted to find a solution to his constant emotional ups and downs, as he found himself swinging wildly between intense joy when things went well, and deep depression when things went badly, making him feel unstable and miserable. He called all the wisest philosophers, scholars, and spiritual teachers of his kingdom to the palace, and commanded them to create a special ring for him, a ring that would carry an inscription capable of calming his mind in times of distress, and grounding him in times of prosperity. The wise men debated for weeks, looking through ancient scrolls and holy books, trying to find a single phrase that could capture the essence of all wisdom, and eventually, they returned to the king, presenting him with a beautiful, simple ring with an inscription carved inside it. The king looked at the inscription, which read that this too shall pass, and as he meditated on those words, a deep, profound sense of peace washed over his soul, for he realized that neither his greatest triumphs nor his deepest sorrows were permanent, but were merely passing scenes in the grand theater of life. When you are going through the darkest valley of your life, when you feel completely broken and alone, you must hold these words close to your heart, remembering that this painful season will also pass away, just like every winter must eventually yield to the spring. Your tears will dry, your wounds will heal, and the sun will rise again over the horizon of your life, bringing new opportunities, new friendships, and a fresh start. The pain you are feeling right now is not a permanent state of being, but a temporary transit lounge, a brief period of purification that is preparing you for a higher level of wisdom and spiritual maturity. To find peace after losing everything, it is absolutely essential to cultivate a deep, sincere sense of forgiveness, both for yourself and for anyone else who may have contributed to your downfall. If your loss was caused by the betrayal of a trusted business partner, the cruelty of a former spouse, or the unfair actions of a system, it is very easy to let your heart become filled with poisonous anger, resentment, and a desire for revenge. You may spend your days plotting how to get even, replaying their betrayals in your head, and cursing their names, but by doing this, you are actually allowing them to continue hurting you, long after the physical event has ended, giving them complete power over your internal state. Resentment is like drinking a deadly poison and expecting the other person to die. It only destroys your own inner peace, burns away your health, and locks you in a prison of your own making, while the other person goes about their life completely unaffected by your anger. Forgiveness is not about condoning their behavior, pretending that what they did was right, or even reconciling with them. It is simply the brave decision to cut the invisible, painful cords of anger that bind you to them, so that you can walk away into the sunlight of freedom. It is an act of supreme self-love, a gift that you give entirely to yourself, because you deserve to live a life that is free from bitterness, conflict, and heavy burdens. You must also learn to forgive yourself for any mistakes, bad decisions, or misjudgments you made that might have contributed to your current situation, because you cannot change the past, and punishing yourself endlessly will not undo what has been done. You did the best you could with the level of awareness, maturity, and information you had at that time, and even if you made a terrible mistake, you have suffered enough, and it is time to wrap yourself in the gentle blanket of self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness, patience, and love that you would offer to a dear friend who came to you weeping, heartbroken, and completely shattered by a great failure, telling them that everything is going to be all right, and that they are still worthy of love and respect. In the old accounts of the enlightened master, there is a fascinating story about a man named Angulimala, whose life was completely ruined by misunderstanding, bad guidance, and a series of terrible choices that led him to become the most feared, ruthless serial killer in the entire kingdom. He lived in a dark forest, attacking innocent travelers, cutting off their fingers to make a grotesque garland around his neck, and his name struck absolute terror into the hearts of everyone, causing whole villages to be abandoned. He had lost his humanity, his virtue, his family, and any hope of a normal, peaceful life, living like a wild beast in the wilderness, driven by a dark, relentless cycle of violence and isolation. One day, as he was looking for his 1,000th victim to complete his horrific garland, he saw the Buddha walking peacefully down the forest path, radiating an extraordinary aura of calmness, dignity, and absolute fearlessness. Angulimala drew his sharp sword, yelled out a terrifying war cry, and ran after the master with all his might, expecting to cut him down easily, but a miraculous phenomenon occurred, for no matter how fast he ran, he could not catch up to the master, who appeared to be walking at a very slow, gentle, and unhurried pace. Exhausted, sweating, and completely bewildered by this impossible sight, the fierce killer stopped, leaned against a tree, and shouted at the top of his voice, demanding that the monk stop walking. The enlightened one stopped, turned around slowly, and looked at the dangerous murderer with eyes filled with boundless, unconditional love, a gaze that saw past the bloody exterior into the deeply wounded, suffering soul within, and spoke in a clear, melodious voice, saying that he had already stopped a long time ago, for he had stopped causing harm to living beings, and it was Angulimala who needed to stop his running. Those profound words, spoken with absolute authority and deep compassion, pierced through the thick armor of the killer's delusion like a sharp arrow of pure light, shattering his violent mind, and making him realize the immense depth of his own suffering and madness. He threw down his sword, fell to his knees at the master's feet, weeping bitterly for all the pain he had caused, and begged to be allowed to join the community of monks, seeking a way out of his dark prison. The Buddha did not condemn him, did not remind him of his past atrocities, and did not tell him that he was beyond redemption. He gently accepted him into the order, guiding him on the path of inner transformation, meditation, and mindfulness. Angulimala had to face the intense, painful consequences of his past actions, for when he walked through the villages to beg for food, people would throw stones, sticks, and mud at him, leaving him bleeding, bruised, and broken, but he bore all of it with absolute patience, forgiveness, and inner silence. Through his dedicated practice, he completely purified his mind, finding a profound, unshakable peace that transformed him from a feared monster into a compassionate saint, proving to everyone that no matter how far you have fallen, and no matter how much you have lost, it is always possible to find your way back to the light of peace. This powerful story teaches everyone that your past does not define your future, and that no matter how broken, ruined, or chaotic your life looks right now, you always possess the inherent capacity to transform your consciousness and find a deep, lasting peace. You do not have to be a victim of your history, you do not have to carry the heavy chains of guilt or regret forever, and you can make a conscious choice in this very moment to stop running after illusions, to stop harming yourself with negative thoughts, and to step onto the path of wisdom. When you have lost everything, you are in a unique position to develop a very rare, powerful quality known as spiritual resilience, which is the ability to withstand the fiercest storms of life without losing your inner stability or your capacity for joy. It is like the bamboo that grows in the valleys, a plant that is remarkably flexible, hollow, and light, yet incredibly strong and rooted deep within the earth. When a powerful typhoon strikes the valley, bringing fierce winds that tear up giant, rigid oak trees by their roots, the bamboo simply bends with the wind, bowing down low to the ground, allowing the immense force of the storm to pass safely over it without breaking, and when the storm subsides, it straightens up again, taller, greener, and more beautiful than before. Being flexible, open, and non-resistant to the changes of life is the great secret of the bamboo, and it is a quality that everyone can cultivate by letting go of their rigid ideas about how life should be, and learning to adapt to how life actually is. When you lose a job, a business, or a lifestyle, instead of breaking under the weight of despair, you can bend gracefully, looking for new ways to channel your creativity, learning new skills, and exploring paths that you had never considered before. You realize that the end of one chapter is merely the beginning of another, and that the book of your life has many more beautiful, unwritten pages waiting to be discovered. Peace is not found in a place where there is no noise, no trouble, or no hard work, but it is found right in the very midst of those things, when you can maintain a calm, quiet center within your own heart, untouched by the external chaos. Think of the deep ocean, where even during a massive, violent hurricane, when the surface of the water is whipped up into towering, terrifying waves that destroy ships and smash against cliffs, the deepest depths of the sea, miles below the surface, remain completely still, silent, and peaceful, undisturbed by the fury above. Your awareness is like that deep ocean, and the thoughts, emotions, and external events of your life are merely the waves on the surface, which can never disturb the deep, quiet sanctuary of your inner being if you learn to anchor yourself there through mindfulness. Mindfulness is the beautiful, simple practice of bringing your attention completely into the present moment, without judgment, observing your thoughts and feelings as they arise and pass away, like clouds drifting through an open sky. When you feel overwhelmed by anxiety about the future, or sorrow about the past, you can always return to your breath, the gentle, rhythmic flow of air entering and leaving your body, a reliable anchor that connects you instantly to the safety of the now. As you breathe in, you can say to yourself that you are aware of the present moment, and as you breathe out, you can say that it is a beautiful moment, allowing the tension in your body to melt away, and letting your mind settle into its natural state of clarity and peace. There was a lovely old monk who lived in a remote monastery, and he was known for his extraordinary skill in calligraphy, drawing beautiful characters that seemed to radiate a vibrant, living energy that touched the hearts of everyone who saw them. One day, a young, eager student came to visit him, wanting to learn the secret of his art, and as he watched the old master work, he noticed that before dipping his brush into the black ink, the monk would close his eyes, take a few deep, slow breaths, and smile gently, completely relaxed. The student asked why he did this, and the master explained that before he could create beauty on the paper, he had to first find the beauty and stillness within his own heart, for if his mind was troubled, rushed, or anxious, his brush strokes would be shaky, weak, and devoid of spirit. The master told the student that life is like a blank sheet of white paper, and every action you take, every word you speak, and every thought you think is a stroke of the brush that creates the picture of your reality. If you act from a place of fear, lack, and desperation, your life will reflect that chaos, but if you take a moment to pause, to breathe, and to connect with the deep stillness inside you, every action you take will be infused with wisdom, grace, and peace, creating a beautiful life regardless of the external circumstances. When you lose everything, it is very natural to feel a deep sense of loneliness, believing that no one understands your pain, and that you are completely isolated in your struggle. But this loneliness can be transformed into a beautiful, sacred solitude, a time of quiet reflection where you can get to know yourself on a much deeper level, uncovering the hidden strengths, talents, and virtues that you never knew you possessed. In the busy, distracting rush of a successful life, you rarely have the time or the inclination to sit quietly with yourself, to listen to the whispers of your soul, and to discover the vast, rich world that exists within you. Solitude is a fertile soil where the seeds of creativity, wisdom, and profound spiritual realization can grow, away from the constant noise and demands of the world. Many of the greatest artists, poets, and spiritual masters throughout history achieved their deepest insights and created their most magnificent works during periods of forced isolation, poverty, or loss, when they had no choice but to turn inward and discover the infinite reservoir of strength within their own being. Your current period of solitude is not a punishment, but a rare gift, a quiet space provided by the universe for you to heal, to rebuild your foundation, and to discover the true source of your power. Think of a majestic lotus flower that grows in a muddy, stagnant pond, surrounded by decaying leaves, dirty water, and murky depths that look uninviting and unpleasant. The lotus does not complain about the mud, it does not try to escape from it, and it does not let the dirt stain its beautiful petals. It uses the rich nutrients hidden within that very mud to fuel its growth, pushing its way up through the dark water, toward the light of the sun. When it reaches the surface, it opens up into a breathtakingly beautiful flower of pure white or pink, completely unstained by the mud from which it grew, a radiant symbol of purity, resilience, and spiritual awakening. Your current difficulties, your financial losses, your emotional pain, and your shattered dreams are the rich mud of your life, and though it feels heavy, dark, and uncomfortable right now, it contains all the spiritual nutrients you need to grow into a truly magnificent, wise, and compassionate human being. You can use this experience to deepen your understanding of life, to cultivate an unbreakable strength of character, and to open your heart to the suffering of others, rising above the muddy waters of despair to blossom into a beautiful light of peace for the world. To find peace after loss, you must also master the beautiful, liberating practice of letting go, which is the willingness to release your grip on what was, so that you can receive what is. Grasping onto the past, onto old identities, and onto things that are no longer here is like trying to hold onto a handful of water. The tighter you squeeze your fist, the faster the water slips through your fingers, leaving you with nothing but an exhausted, aching hand. When you open your palm, completely relaxed, the water can rest there peacefully, and you realize that freedom is not about possessing things, but about being in a harmonious, non-resistant relationship with the flow of life. Letting go is not an act of weakness, it is an act of supreme courage and wisdom, a declaration that you are stronger than your circumstances, and that you trust the intelligent, unfolding process of existence. It means looking at the ruins of your past with a gentle smile of gratitude for the lessons it taught you, and then turning your face toward the future, ready to embrace the new adventures, the new relationships, and the new opportunities that are waiting for you. It is a total surrender to the present moment, a deep, comforting realization that everything happens for a reason, and that the universe is always working for your highest good, even when it manifests as a painful loss. There was an old story told by the desert nomads about a weary traveler who was lost in a vast, burning desert, his water canteen completely empty, his lips cracked, and his throat parched with an unbearable thirst. He stumbled over sand dunes for hours under the blazing sun, feeling his strength rapidly fading, knowing that if he did not find water soon, he would perish in the wilderness. Suddenly, he saw a small, abandoned wooden hut in the distance, and with his remaining energy, he crawled toward it, seeking shelter from the heat, and when he stepped inside, he found a rusted water pump fixed to the ground. He pumped the handle desperately, but nothing came out, only a dry, empty sound that filled him with despair, but then he noticed a small glass bottle hidden behind the pump, filled with pure, clear water, and corked tightly to prevent evaporation. Attached to the bottle was a handwritten note left by a previous traveler, which read that you must pour all the water from this bottle into the top of the pump to prime it, and then you will get all the fresh water you can ever drink, but you must remember to refill the bottle for the next person before you leave. The traveler was faced with a terrible, agonizing dilemma, for he could simply drink the water in the bottle right now, which would save his life for a few more hours, but if he poured it into the pump and it did not work, he would lose everything, dying of thirst in the empty desert. He stood there trembling, torn between the fear of loss and the possibility of abundance, but finally, he chose to trust the note, and with a shaking hand, he poured every single drop of the precious water into the pump, and began to pump the handle with all his might. At first, nothing happened, and his heart sank with terror, but suddenly, a deep gurgling sound echoed from the depths of the earth, and a magnificent, freezing torrent of fresh, sweet water erupted from the spout, washing over his face and filling the entire room with life. He drank until he was completely satisfied, washed his dusty face, rested in the shade, and filled his canteen to the brim, experiencing a profound sense of gratitude and joy that he had never felt before in his entire life. Before leaving the hut to continue his journey, He refilled the glass bottle with fresh water, corked it securely, and added a small note of his own below the original text, writing that you can believe me, it really works, for you must give away what you have in order to receive the true abundance that lies hidden beneath the surface. This beautiful parable contains the essential key to finding peace and rebuilding your life after a major loss, for it teaches everyone that you must have the courage to pour out the remaining water of your attachments, your fears, and your limited understandings if you want to tap into the infinite reservoir of life, energy, and joy that exists within your own being. You must trust the process of life, even when it demands that you let go of everything you hold dear, knowing that the universe never takes something away without creating a space for something much greater to enter. When you look back at the history of your life from a position of wisdom, years from now, you will often find that the moments you thought were absolute disasters, the times when you lost your job, your money, or your relationships, were actually the greatest blessings in disguise, because they redirected your path toward your true calling, forced you to develop your inner strength, and introduced you to the deep peace that can never be shaken by the world. You will see that every storm was a purification, every loss was a liberation, and every heartbreak was a gentle cracking open of your soul to allow the light of truth to shine through. So, if you are standing in the midst of the ruins today, if you are weeping for what is gone, and if you feel completely lost in the dark, take a deep, slow breath, place your hand over your heart, and feel the steady, miraculous rhythm of your life force continuing to flow within you. You are still here, you are still alive, and as long as you have your breath, your awareness, and your capacity to love and forgive, you have not lost everything, for you possess the ultimate treasury of existence right inside you. Let the past go with a gentle smile of acceptance, plant your feet firmly in the beautiful safety of the present moment, and know that you are fully capable of finding your way back to a profound, radiant, and everlasting peace. This vital breath, moving quietly through your body in this very moment, is the ultimate proof that your story is far from over, and that the universe still has a beautiful, profound purpose for your existence. When you look closely at the nature of a river, you notice that it never runs backward, it never wastes its energy trying to return to the mountains where it was born, and it never laments the rocks, the twists, or the waterfalls it left behind. It simply flows forward, adapting its shape to whatever landscape it encounters, finding a way around massive mountains, carving through hard stones, and expanding into wide, calm valleys, completely trusting its natural destiny to merge with the vast, boundless ocean. Your consciousness is just like that majestic, flowing river, and the losses you have experienced are merely the sharp bends and rocky cliffs that are shaping your soul, forcing you to discover new depths of resilience, grace, and inner vastness that you would never have found in a flat, stagnant life. In the old, historical records of the eastern lands, there is a profound account of a wealthy landowner named Yasodhara, not the princess, but a dedicated lay follower of the path, who spent decades accumulating a magnificent collection of sacred scriptures, rare paintings, and precious jade statues of the enlightened ones. He housed this invaluable treasure in a beautiful, grand pavilion made of cedar wood, and he took immense pride in showing his collection to visitors, believing that his extensive spiritual library made him superior, wiser, and much closer to enlightenment than the ordinary people of the village. One night, a sudden, fierce lightning storm struck the village, and a spark ignited the roof of his pavilion, causing a massive, roaring fire that devoured the entire building and every single sacred scroll within a matter of minutes, leaving nothing but a pile of smoldering, gray ash. When the morning sun rose, the man stood before the smoking ruins of his life's work, weeping bitterly, tearing his clothes, and feeling an absolute, suffocating despair, as he felt that his entire spiritual identity, his pride, and his connection to the truth had been completely obliterated. The local villagers gathered around him, offering words of sympathy and sorrow, but their kind words could not reach the depth of his grief, and he remained sitting in the dust, staring blankly at the ashes for days, refusing to eat or speak. Seeing his devastating state, an old, wandering monk who happened to be passing through the district walked up to him, sat down directly in the dirt beside him, and remained completely silent for a long time, simply sharing the heavy space of his sorrow with a gentle, compassionate presence. After hours of silence, the wandering monk picked up a handful of the gray ash from the ground, let it sift slowly through his fingers back into the wind, and spoke in a very soft, penetrating voice, asking the weeping man if the words written on the burned scrolls were the truth, or if the truth was that which witnessed the burning of the scrolls. This simple, profound question echoed through the man's shattered mind like a sudden clap of thunder, shaking him out of his deep trance of grief, and making him realize that he had mistaken the paper, the ink, and the external symbols of wisdom for the wisdom itself. He understood that the flame had only destroyed the dry leaves of his possessions, but it could never touch the eternal, unwritten truth that lived within his own awareness, and with that realization, a wave of cool, magnificent peace washed over his heart, allowing him to stand up, shake the dust from his robes, and smile with a freedom he had never known when his hands were full of treasures. When you lose everything, you are given the rare, extraordinary gift of a completely clean slate, a blank canvas upon which you can paint a new life based on absolute truth, simplicity, and authentic joy, rather than on the expectations of society or the fears of your ego. Most people spend their entire lives building a delicate, complex structure of habits, reputations, and possessions, and they become so afraid of this structure collapsing that they live in a state of permanent, underlying tension, modifying their behavior, suppressing their true feelings, and tolerating toxic situations just to keep the building standing. But when the structure collapses completely through a great crisis, that terrible fear is finally gone, because the worst has already happened, and you are suddenly left with a strange, beautiful sense of lightness, discovering that you are still standing, still breathing, and still completely whole. It is like a person who has spent years defending a small, crowded fortress in the middle of a beautiful valley, constantly looking out the windows for enemies, checking the locks on the heavy iron doors, and fighting off imaginary dangers, exhausted and stressed by the endless vigilance. One day, a great earthquake shakes the valley, and the fortress crumbles to the ground, leaving the person exposed to the open air, with nowhere to hide and no walls to protect them from the world. But as they look around, they notice that there are no enemies in sight, the sun is shining brightly, the birds are singing in the green trees, and the cool mountain breeze is washing over their skin, and they realize that the fortress they were protecting so desperately was actually a prison that kept them from enjoying the immense beauty of the open valley. True peace is never found within the walls of your comfort zone, because your comfort zone is built on the illusion of control, a fragile belief that you can manipulate external conditions to guarantee your permanent safety and happiness. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, will always shatter that illusion eventually, not out of cruelty, but out of absolute love, to rescue you from the small, stagnant ponds of your attachments and push you into the grand, dynamic ocean of real life. When you can welcome change, when you can step out into the unknown with an open heart, and when you can look at a total loss not as a tragic ending, but as a mysterious, exciting redirection, you achieve a level of freedom that makes you completely invincible to the storms of the world. There is a fascinating, ancient story from the time of the great masters about a young, successful pottery maker named Siddhartha, who was renowned across many provinces for creating the most exquisite, delicate porcelain vases, which were sought after by kings, nobles, and wealthy merchants. He spent months creating a masterpiece for the emperor's upcoming birthday, using a secret blend of clay, painting intricate patterns of golden dragons with a single hair brush, and firing it in his kiln with absolute precision, creating a vase so beautiful that it seemed to glow with its own internal light. As he was transporting the precious vase to the imperial palace on a horse cart, a sudden, wild dog ran out from the bushes, frightening the horse and causing the cart to tilt violently, sending the masterpiece crashing down onto the hard, stone road, where it shattered into 1,000 tiny, unfixable pieces. The young artisan felt his heart freeze, his breath stop, and a cold sweat break out across his body, as he realized that months of intense labor, his financial future, and his great chance at fame had been destroyed in a single, careless second. The people on the street gathered around the wreckage, gasping in horror, clicking their tongues in sympathy, and looking at the young man to see how he would react to this absolute disaster. But Siddhartha did not cry out, he did not curse the dog, and he did not sink onto the ground in despair. He simply looked at the shining fragments of porcelain for a long moment, took a deep, gentle breath, picked up his walking stick, and continued walking toward the marketplace with a calm, unruffled expression on his face. A curious merchant who had witnessed the event ran after him, asking him in utter amazement how he could remain so calm and indifferent when his greatest treasure, a work of art that could have changed his entire life, had just been completely ruined before his eyes. The young pottery maker stopped, looked at the merchant with clear, peaceful eyes, and replied that the vase is already broken, and replaying the accident in his mind, weeping on the road, or getting angry at the dog will not bring a single piece of the porcelain back together. He explained that the vase existed in the past, but his life exists right now in the present, and by refusing to carry the dead weight of a broken vase into his future, he remained free to create an even more beautiful masterpiece tomorrow, because the skill, the creativity, and the passion did not belong to the pottery, but belonged entirely to the potter. This beautiful perspective is what everyone needs to cultivate when they are facing a major loss, for you must realize that the wealth, the career, the relationship, or the position you lost was merely the pottery, the external expression of your inner energy, your intelligence, and your capacity to love. The external creation may be shattered beyond repair, but the internal creator, which is your brilliant soul, remains completely untouched, fully intact, and infinitely capable of building a new, even more magnificent reality from scratch. You did not lose your ability to work, you did not lose your capacity to care, and you did not lose your intelligence, so as long as the potter is alive and well, there is absolutely no reason to mourn the loss of the pottery. Finding peace after a devastating experience requires a profound shift in how you perceive the passage of time, learning to untangle your awareness from the sticky web of memory and projection, and resting deeply in the absolute safety of the immediate present. When you analyze your suffering, you will find that it almost never exists in the actual, physical reality of the current second, but is created entirely by your mind traveling back to the past to grieve what is gone, or jumping forward into the future to worry about what might happen. If you can pull your mind back from those mental time travels, and anchor your attention completely on the physical sensations of this very moment, the weight of the air on your skin, the sound of the traffic outside, or the sight of the light on the wall, you will find that right here, right now, everything is actually perfectly okay. There was a wise, old spiritual grandmother who lived in a small village, and she was famous for her ability to heal people who were suffering from deep trauma, grief, and emotional brokenness, using a very simple but extraordinary method. When a heartbroken person came to her hut, weeping about a loss or trembling with anxiety about their survival, she would not give them advice, she would not analyze their problems, and she would not talk about theology. Instead, she would gently hand them a small, ripe strawberry, look into their tearful eyes with infinite warmth, and ask them to describe the exact taste, the texture, and the sweetness of that single fruit as they chewed it slowly. As the suffering person focused their entire attention on the taste of the strawberry, their crying would stop, their breathing would become smooth and deep, and a gentle smile would break out across their face, as the heavy burden of their psychological pain vanished for a moment into the rich sensation of the present. The wise woman would then tell them that the sweetness of the strawberry is the reality of life, while the pain they were carrying was merely a shadow created by their thoughts, reminding them that no matter how difficult their situation was, the present moment always contains a hidden drop of sweetness if they are willing to taste it. When you lose everything, your ego experiences an absolute crisis, because the ego survives by consuming external things, feeding on titles, possessions, praise, and social comparisons to maintain its fragile sense of identity. It constantly whispers in your ear that you are what you own, that you are what people think of you, and that without your wealth or your status, you are an absolute nobody, a complete failure who deserves to be hidden away in shame. But this crisis of the ego is the exact birth of your true spiritual self, the awakening of that deep, silent consciousness within you that does not care about bank accounts, does not need the approval of others, and remains perfectly at peace in its own inherent worth. Think of a magnificent, ancient diamond that has been buried deep inside a dark, muddy mountain for millions of years, completely hidden from the sight of the world, untouched by the sun, and unknown to any human being. The diamond does not feel sad because it is hidden in the mud, it does not feel worthless because nobody is praising its beauty, and it does not lose its dazzling, brilliant radiance just because it is surrounded by dark, heavy earth. Its value is intrinsic, built into its very structure by the immense pressure and heat of nature, and whether it is displayed in a royal crown or buried deep beneath the dirt, it remains exactly the same precious, indestructible gem. You are that magnificent diamond, and your value as a human being is intrinsic, born with you, and completely independent of how much money you have in the bank, what kind of car you drive, or how many people know your name. The losses you are experiencing right now are merely the shaking of the muddy mountain around you, a painful but necessary process that is clearing away the dirt of your illusions, so that your true, radiant light can finally shine out into the world. When you realize that your worth cannot be increased by success and cannot be decreased by failure, you achieve a state of profound, unshakable dignity, a peace that no economic crisis, no betrayal, and no misfortune can ever take away from you. In the timeless records of the early spiritual communities, there is a moving account of a young prince named Mahanama, who was a close relative of the enlightened master, a man who had grown up in the midst of absolute luxury, surrounded by beautiful palaces, fine silks, and faithful servants who anticipated his every need. Due to a violent political coup in the kingdom, led by a ruthless rival, his family was suddenly overthrown, his property was confiscated, and he was forced to flee into the deep jungle with nothing but the clothes on his back, transformed in a single day from a powerful royal into a homeless fugitive. He found himself sleeping under trees, gathering wild fruits for food, and shivering in the cold night rain, experiencing a level of physical hardship and social humiliation that he had never even imagined possible in his past life. One afternoon, as he was sitting by a quiet stream in the forest, trying to mend his torn robes with a sharp thorn, a group of his former ministers who had also escaped found him, and they fell to their knees, weeping bitterly at the sight of their prince living in such miserable, impoverished conditions. They lamented his terrible fate, cursing the rebels who had stolen their kingdom, and expressing their deep sorrow that a man of his noble birth had been reduced to the level of a common beggar. But Mahanama looked at them with a serene, radiant smile, helped them up from the ground, and told them that they should not weep, because he had never felt richer, freer, or more truly noble than he did at that very moment in the quiet forest. He explained to his amazed companions that when he lived in the palace, he was a prisoner of his own wealth, his mind was constantly filled with anxiety about political conspiracies, his heart was hardened by pride, and he was always surrounded by people who flattered him for his power rather than loving him for who he was. In the simplicity of the jungle, stripped of all titles and possessions, he had found the time to look deep within his own heart, discovering a profound connection with nature, a boundless compassion for all living beings, and a quiet stillness that the golden walls of his palace could never provide. He realized that the coup had not stolen his kingdom, but had actually liberated him from a golden cage, allowing him to discover the true, indestructible kingdom of inner peace that exists inside every human soul. This beautiful story reminds everyone that the external conditions of your life do not dictate the quality of your internal experience, and that it is fully possible to find a deep, vibrant joy even when you are stripped of all comfort and security. In fact, many people discover that it is only when they have nothing left to lose that they can finally start living authentically, without the constant fear of falling, without the need to impress anyone, and without the heavy chains of anxiety that define the modern human condition. Poverty of possessions can often lead to an immense, magnificent richness of the soul, if you are willing to let go of your resistance and embrace the simple, raw beauty of existence. To find your way back to peace after a major loss, it is incredibly important to look at your environment with fresh eyes, practicing the profound art of gratitude for the small, everyday miracles that you usually take for granted when your life is busy and successful. When you are focused on making money, achieving goals, and climbing the ladder of success, your mind becomes narrow, looking only at what is missing, what needs to be done next, and how you can get more, turning you into a restless machine that can never be satisfied. But when you lose everything, that frantic race comes to a sudden halt, and you are forced to slow down, giving you the rare opportunity to open your eyes and see the extraordinary richness that already surrounds you. You can find a deep sense of comfort and joy in the simple fact that you can see the magnificent colors of the sunset, that you can hear the beautiful song of a bird in the morning, that you can feel the warmth of the sun on your face, or that you can taste a simple bowl of warm water. These basic experiences of life are absolute miracles, priceless gifts from the universe that cannot be bought with money, and when you can fill your heart with genuine appreciation for them, your sense of poverty instantly vanishes. You realize that as long as you have your consciousness, your senses, and your connection to this beautiful earth, you are a deeply wealthy being, a participant in a grand, magical cosmos that supports you in every single second. There was an ancient, wise teacher who lived a very simple life in a small, thatched hut at the edge of a great forest, and his only possessions were a single wooden bowl for begging food and a coarse woolen blanket to protect him from the cold winter wind. One dark night, a desperate thief broke into his hut, searching through the corners for money or valuables, but found absolutely nothing to steal, and as the thief was about to leave in frustration, the master woke up from his sleep. Instead of getting angry, yelling for help, or attacking the intruder, The teacher looked at the cold, shivering thief with eyes full of deep compassion, took off his own woolen blanket and gently handed it to the man, telling him that he was sorry he had nothing else to give him, but he wanted him to have this small warmth for his long journey home. The thief was completely stunned by this unexpected kindness, took the blanket in silence, and ran away into the dark night, leaving the old master sitting alone in his empty hut, shivering in the cold air without any protection. The teacher looked out the small window of his hut, watching the magnificent, full moon shining brightly in the clear, starry sky, casting a beautiful, silver light over the quiet trees and the sleeping earth, and he sighed with a deep, poetic sorrow, wishing that he could have given the poor thief this beautiful moon as well. This story beautifully illustrates the mindset of a truly awakened being, a person whose wealth is not measured by what they hold in their hands, but by the vastness of their heart, a mind that is so rich in peace and contentment that it looks at the moon and feels completely satisfied, needing absolutely nothing else to be happy. When you can develop this kind of deep content, when you can look at the simple beauty of nature and feel your heart overflow with quiet joy, you become completely independent of the economic conditions of the world. You realize that the best things in life are truly free, and that the modern consumer culture, which tells you that you need to constantly buy, achieve, and possess things to be worthy, is a giant illusion designed to keep you in a state of permanent dissatisfaction. True peace is found by wanting less, not by acquiring more, and when you can reduce your desires to the absolute basics, you find that your life becomes incredibly light, unburdened, and radiantly happy. Losing everything also gives you a unique, powerful opportunity to practice the essential spiritual quality of non-attachment, which is the understanding that everything in this universe is a temporary gift, a loan from the earth that you can enjoy for a brief moment, but can never truly own. When you buy a house, a piece of land, or a beautiful object, you receive a piece of paper that says you are the owner, but this ownership is merely a social convention, a convenient fiction that has no reality in the grand eyes of nature. The land was here millions of years before you were born, it will be here millions of years after you are gone, and you are merely a passing guest, a temporary tenant who has no right to claim permanent possession of anything. Think of yourself as a traveler who checks into a magnificent, 5-star luxury hotel for a single night, enjoying the soft bed, the beautiful paintings on the walls, the warm shower, and the delicious food provided by the room service. You enjoy all these comforts thoroughly while you are there, but you do not get attached to them, you do not start believing that the television or the furniture belongs to you, and when the morning comes and it is time to check out, you pack your small bag and walk away without a single tear, without any feeling of loss or anger. You understood from the very beginning that your stay was temporary, that the room belonged to the hotel, and that your only job was to enjoy the experience without trying to carry the hotel away on your back. Life is that grand hotel, and every possession, every relationship, and even your physical body is merely a room you are renting for a very short time, a beautiful space to experience the world before your time is up and you have to check out. When you look at your life through this beautiful perspective, the pain of loss completely disappears, because you realize that you cannot lose what you never truly owned in the first place, and that everything that leaves your life is simply checking out of your room to make space for the next guest. You learn to hold everything with an open, relaxed palm, loving deeply, appreciating fully, but never squeezing your fist around anything, allowing the universe to give and take according to its own divine, intelligent rhythm. In the ancient, beautiful scriptures of the path, there is a profound account of an old king named Janaka, who was a brilliant ruler and a deeply dedicated seeker of truth, a man who managed to balance the immense responsibilities of a kingdom with a mind that was perfectly anchored in spiritual stillness. One afternoon, as he was sitting in his grand audience hall, listening to a group of wise sages discuss the nature of the ultimate reality, a royal messenger rushed into the room, gasping for breath, and announced that a massive, uncontrollable fire had broken out in the capital city, and that the imperial palace itself was burning down to the ground. The ministers, the guards, and the scholars panicked, shouting in terror, running out of the hall to save their families and their treasures, leaving the king sitting completely alone on his golden throne, completely undisturbed by the chaotic news. A wise sage who had remained in the room looked at the king in great astonishment, asking him why he did not rush out to save his magnificent palace, his golden crowns, and his vast treasures from the devastating flames that were devouring his wealth. King Janaka looked at the sage with a calm, unruffled smile, and replied that even though the city and the palace are burning, nothing that belongs to him is being consumed by the fire, because his true kingdom is not made of stone, gold, or wood, but is built entirely of the eternal, unchangeable peace of his own soul. He understood that his identity as a king was merely a passing role he was playing on the stage of life, and that whether he lived in a grand palace or under a simple tree, the internal majesty of his consciousness remained completely the same, untouched by the changing fortunes of the physical world. This profound state of consciousness is the ultimate goal of the human journey, a level of spiritual maturity where your peace is so deep, so grounded, and so unshakable that even if your entire external world burns to the ground, you can sit amidst the ashes with a calm smile, knowing that your true essence is safe and sound. It is a peace that does not depend on the absence of trouble, but is found right in the middle of the fire, a sanctuary of stillness that you carry inside you wherever you go, completely independent of the changing winds of destiny. When you can find this inner sanctuary, you have truly found the ultimate treasury of life, and all the losses of the world become nothing more than passing ripples on the surface of a deep, silent ocean. To rebuild your life from this clear, peaceful space, you must learn to take very small, simple steps each day, focusing entirely on doing the next right thing with a heart full of love and dedication, without worrying about how long it will take to reach your destination. When you look at the entire mountain you have to climb to rebuild your finances, your career, or your relationships, the view can be completely overwhelming, filling your mind with a deep sense of fatigue, doubt, and paralysis that prevents you from even starting. But you do not have to climb the entire mountain in a single day, you only have to take a single, steady step forward, focusing your entire energy on placing your foot down firmly and beautifully on the ground right in front of you. Think of a master builder who wants to construct a magnificent, towering brick wall that will stand for centuries, resisting the wind, the rain, and the earthquakes of the world, a monument of strength and beauty. He does not start by looking at the vast dimensions of the wall and feeling overwhelmed by the thousands of bricks he needs to lay. He starts by picking up a single brick, mixing the mortar with absolute care, and laying that single brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. He focuses his entire attention, his skill, and his passion on that one brick for that moment, making sure it is perfectly straight, perfectly balanced, and perfectly secure, and then the next day, he picks up another brick and lays it with the same absolute devotion, knowing that if every single brick is laid perfectly, the magnificent wall will naturally take care of itself. Your life is that magnificent wall, and every single day is a brick that you are laying through your choices, your words, and your actions, and your only job is to lay the brick of today as beautifully and peacefully as you possibly can. Do not worry about the bricks of tomorrow, do not weep over the broken bricks of yesterday, simply focus on doing your current task, whether it is washing a dish, writing a letter, looking for a job, or talking to a friend, with a mind that is completely present, loving, and content. As you build your life piece by piece from this foundation of inner stillness, you will find that you are creating a reality that is far deeper, truer, and more beautiful than anything you lost in the past. There is another moving, historical narrative from the ancient traditions about a young monk named Tissa, who was assigned by his monastery to care for an old, severely ill monk who had been abandoned by everyone else because his body was covered in painful, foul-smelling sores that made it deeply unpleasant to be near him. Tissa had grown up in a gentle family, and he found the task incredibly difficult, feeling a deep sense of aversion, nausea, and exhaustion as he spent his days washing bloody linen, cleaning wounds, and lifting the heavy, frail body of the sick man. He began to feel a deep bitterness creeping into his heart, wondering why he had to suffer through such a dirty, unglamorous task while the other monks were sitting in the beautiful meditation hall, listening to profound philosophy and enjoying the quiet peace of the garden. One evening, as he was carrying a bucket of dirty water out of the room, feeling completely broken and ready to abandon his vows, the enlightened master himself walked into the small hut, accompanied by his chief disciples, carrying a basin of warm water and clean clothes. Without saying a word of lecture, the master sat down directly on the dirt floor beside the sick monk, dipped a clean cloth into the warm water, and began to wash the foul-smelling sores with the utmost tenderness, gentleness, and love, his face radiating a serene, magnificent beauty that illuminated the entire dark room. The master looked up at the young, exhausted Tissa, smiled with eyes full of infinite understanding, and told him that the path to true peace is not found by running away from the suffering of the world into a quiet room, but by bringing the absolute stillness of your heart into the very middle of the mess, transforming every dirty task into a sacred act of devotion. This profound lesson completely shattered the young monk's resistance, making him realize that the dirt and the foul smell were not his enemies, but were the exact tools he needed to burn away his ego, his pride, and his attachments, opening his heart to the true light of unconditional compassion. He joined the master in washing the sick man, his heart suddenly light, free, and overflowing with a deep, vibrant peace that he had never found in his long hours of solitary meditation, discovering that when you serve others with a pure, selfless mind, you find the ultimate sanctuary right where you are standing. When you are going through a period of great loss and rebuilding, you can use your experience to connect with this deep level of compassion, turning your personal pain into a powerful bridge of empathy that allows you to understand and soothe the suffering of the world around you. Instead of shutting yourself away in a dark room of self-pity, wondering why life was unfair to you, you can open your heart to the neighbors, the friends, or the strangers who are also hurting, offering them a kind word, a listening ear, or a small gesture of support from your own empty hands. By helping others heal their wounds, you miraculously heal your own, and you find that the love you give away returns to you 100-fold, filling your soul with a profound warmth and meaning that money can never buy. The process of finding peace after losing everything is not a swift, linear journey that happens overnight, but a gentle, organic unfurling of your consciousness that requires an immense amount of patience, trust, and self-compassion as you navigate the shifting tides of your emotions. There will be days when you feel incredibly strong, clear, and radiant with hope, looking forward to your new life with absolute confidence and joy, feeling that the storm has completely passed and you are firmly anchored in peace. And then, without any warning, a simple trigger, a familiar song, a specific smell, or a passing thought, can pull you right back into the ocean of sorrow, causing the tears to flow again and making you feel as though you have made absolutely no progress at all on your path. When those difficult days arrive, you must not beat yourself up, you must not feel that you have failed, and you must not try to forcefully suppress your sadness, for healing is a winding, spiraling road, not a straight line, and every emotional wave needs to be allowed to crest and break naturally. Treat yourself with the same exquisite gentleness that a loving mother offers to her small, crying child who has just scraped their knee on the ground, holding yourself close in your awareness, allowing the tears to wash away the remaining traces of old pain, and reminding yourself that this too is a natural part of your beautiful transformation. Every tear you shed with awareness is a drop of rain that softens the hard soil of your heart, allowing the seeds of true, unshakable wisdom to grow even deeper into the earth, preparing you for a life that is completely grounded in reality. Think of a grand, ancient palace built by a wise king on the solid bedrock of a towering mountain, a structure designed to last for generations, with massive stone pillars, beautiful arched windows, and a strong, heavy roof that protects the inhabitants from the fiercest winter blizzards. The king does not build the palace with fragile glass or soft wood that can be easily shattered by the storm. He uses the hardest granite, the deepest foundations, and the most flexible joinery, knowing that the winds will blow, the rains will fall, and the earth will shake eventually, and that the palace must be strong enough to withstand anything nature throws at it. Your inner life is that grand palace, and the bedrock is your awareness. The stone pillars are your virtues of patience, forgiveness, and non-attachment, and the strong roof is your deep, unwavering trust in the intelligent process of life. When your external world is swept away, it is an invitation from the universe to stop living in a fragile, temporary tent built on the shifting sands of material success, and to begin constructing a magnificent, permanent palace of peace on the solid bedrock of your true spiritual nature. It forces you to abandon the shallow, superficial values of the ego, and to discover the deep, timeless principles of the soul, building a life that is so rooted in wisdom, compassion, and presence that nothing in this world can ever destroy it again. You become a truly grounded being, a light of stability and calm in a chaotic world, a person who can look at the rising and falling of empires, economies, and personal fortunes with a serene, unruffled gaze, knowing that the ultimate reality is always safe, always peaceful, and always right here. In the beautiful, old accounts of the great spiritual masters, there is a lovely story about a simple woodcutter named Vasudeva, who lived in a small cabin near the edge of a great kingdom, spending his days cutting dry wood in the forest, loading it onto his back, and selling it in the marketplace for a few copper coins to buy his daily bread. He was deeply loved by everyone in the neighborhood because he always had a warm smile on his face, a kind word for the children, and a song in his heart, looking as perfectly content and happy as if he were the richest noble in the land, despite his extreme poverty and hard physical labor. One day, a massive gold rush occurred in the neighboring mountains, and thousands of people from the village rushed away to dig for treasure, abandoning their fields, their businesses, and their simple lives, driven by a wild, frantic desire to accumulate vast fortunes of gold and become fabulously wealthy overnight. Many of his close friends begged Vasudeva to come with them, telling him that he was foolish to waste his life cutting wood for copper coins when he could easily find gold in the mountains and live a life of luxury, ease, and grand comfort. The simple woodcutter smiled gently, thanked them for their concern, but refused to go, stating that he already possessed the greatest treasure a human could ever find, which was a mind that was perfectly content with what it had, and a heart that was completely at peace in the present moment. He explained that the people running to the mountains were driven by a ghost of lack, believing that they were not enough as they were, and that if they found the gold, they would only become prisoners of their own wealth, spending their days worrying about thieves, security, and market prices, losing the simple joy of breathing the fresh forest air and singing under the stars. The friends laughed at his simplicity, calling him ignorant, and rushed away to the mountains, where many of them indeed found vast amounts of gold, building grand mansions, buying fine horses, and dressing in rich silks, becoming the new elite of the province. But as the years went by, the simple woodcutter watched as these newly rich men became deeply stressed, suspicious of their neighbors, argumentative with their families, and plagued by constant insomnia, their faces growing old, wrinkled, and bitter with the heavy weight of protecting their fortunes. They had accumulated a massive amount of yellow metal from the earth, but they had completely lost their laughter, their peace of mind, and their connection to the simple beauty of life, living in a golden hell of their own making. Meanwhile, Vasudeva continued to walk into the forest each morning, breathing the fresh, pine-scented air, listening to the beautiful music of the streams, and cutting his wood with a heart full of deep, effortless joy, his health vibrant and his spirit as light as a feather. When he walked through the marketplace in the evening, the wealthy men would look out from the high windows of their grand mansions, seeing his radiant smile and hearing his cheerful song, and they would feel a deep, painful pang of envy in their hearts, realizing that this simple man with nothing in his pockets possessed the very thing that all their gold could never buy, which was a perfectly peaceful, happy, and liberated soul. This beautiful parable contains a profound message for anyone who is grieving the loss of their material wealth or social position, for it reminds you that the true treasures of life are completely invisible to the eyes, completely free of charge, and completely independent of your external circumstances. You do not need a fortune to be rich, you do not need a palace to be majestic, and you do not need the applause of the world to be profoundly worthy, for the ultimate source of all abundance lives right inside your own chest, waiting to be discovered through the beautiful keys of contentment, presence, and non-attachment. When you can let go of the frantic desire to possess and control the world, you find that the entire universe belongs to you, and that every sunrise, every breath, and every moment is a magnificent gift of pure love. So, as you walk through this challenging season of your life, when the ruins of your past are still visible around you, and the path ahead looks uncertain and steep, let your heart settle into the beautiful safety of the now, knowing that you are exactly where you need to be for your soul's deepest awakening. Do not look back at what was taken away with anger or regret, but look at what remains within you with a sense of profound wonder, trust, and absolute confidence in your inherent resilience. You are a powerful, beautiful being of light, a manifestation of the eternal consciousness of this universe, and you possess the absolute capacity to transform your pain into wisdom, your loss into liberation, and your sorrow into an everlasting, radiant peace that will guide you and everyone around you back to the light of truth. Let the river of your life flow naturally, without resistance, embracing every rock, every twist, and every wide valley with the same calm, unruffled grace, knowing that every single drop of your experience is leading you closer to the grand ocean of complete spiritual freedom. Keep your heart open, keep your breath deep, keep your steps steady, and know that the sun is always shining behind the thickest clouds, waiting to illuminate your path with new blessings, new friendships, and a fresh, magnificent dawn that will make your soul sing with a joy that can never be broken by the world. You are fully capable of rebuilding your foundation on truth, simplicity, and love, creating a life that is a beautiful masterpiece of peace, a radiant testament to the indestructible power of the human spirit when it is aligned with the eternal laws of Dharma. As you step forward into this day, let the stillness of your mind be your primary guide, allowing your words to be soft, your actions to be kind, and your choices to be infused with the profound wisdom of acceptance, releasing all expectations and trusting the beautiful unfolding of your destiny. You are never truly alone, you are never truly broken, and you are never truly lost, for the deep, comforting sanctuary of your inner being is always right here, always available, and always waiting to cradle you in its infinite, peaceful embrace whenever you choose to return home to yourself. Breathe in the freshness of the present moment, breathe out the heavy shadows of the past, and let the radiant light of your peaceful heart shine out clearly, beautifully, and magnificently into the world, transforming every difficulty into a sacred flower of wisdom. This quiet sanctuary, thriving gently within your chest, is the ultimate baseline of your existence, a place where no economic tide can reach, and no social storm can ever destroy the fundamental purity of your being. When you observe the vastness of the sky above, you notice how it allows magnificent golden eagles to fly through its space, how it accepts heavy black rain clouds that bring fierce thunderstorms, and how it welcomes the brilliant white rays of the midday sun, yet the sky itself never becomes stained, never gets heavy, and never loses its infinite capacity to hold everything with absolute openness. Your true awareness is exactly like that boundless sky, and all the events of your life, the grand successes, the sudden betrayals, the financial collapses, and the seasons of deep grief, are merely weather patterns passing through you, unable to alter the spacious nature of your soul. In the classical narratives of the old monasteries, there is a beautiful account concerning a highly respected pottery master named Upali, who lived in a small valley famed for its pure clay and clear river water. He had spent his entire life working with his hands, creating beautiful water jars that were perfectly balanced, strong, and capable of keeping water cool during the hottest summer months, and his business had grown so large that he owned a grand workshop with 10 massive kilns and employed dozens of young apprentices from the surrounding villages. One afternoon, a sudden, violent earthquake shook the valley with unprecedented force, causing the hills to slide, and within a few terrifying minutes, his entire workshop collapsed, his massive kilns crumbled into heaps of broken brick, and thousands of finished jars were smashed into a vast sea of worthless red dust, completely destroying his livelihood, his wealth, and his life's work. The young apprentices ran around the ruins, weeping for their lost jobs, screaming in panic about how they would survive the coming winter, and looking at their old master with eyes full of deep terror and despair. Upali, however, did not drop to his knees, he did not cry out to the heavens, and he did not let a single trace of anger or sadness cross his calm, wrinkled face. He simply walked over to the river bank, sat down on a smooth stone, and began to watch the gentle flow of the water with a soft, peaceful expression. After a long silence, he looked at his panicked workers, smiled with a warm, grandfatherly tenderness, and told them that the clay that made the jars came from this very earth, the water came from this very river, and the skill to shape them lived inside their own minds, reminding them that as long as the earth, the water, and their breath remained, nothing of true value had actually been lost. He picked up a fresh handful of wet clay from the riverbank, rolled it gently between his palms, and explained that the destruction of the old workshop was merely a quiet invitation from nature to build a new, much better structure, one with deeper foundations and stronger beams that could withstand any future shaking of the earth. His absolute calmness and unwavering trust in the present moment completely transformed the energy of the entire group, wiping away their fear, and filling their hearts with a fresh, vibrant determination that allowed them to start clearing the rubble that very afternoon with songs of joy on their lips. This profound story illustrates the immense power of a mind that does not anchor its identity in the external products of its labor, but rests deeply in the permanent, creative source within, a source that can never be buried by any disaster. When you find yourself standing amidst the wreckage of your own life, with your bank accounts empty, your relationships dissolved, or your social standing completely gone, you must realize that you have not been demoted by the universe, but you have actually been promoted to a higher level of spiritual awareness. Most people are deeply asleep in the comfortable cradle of their daily routines, believing that their happiness depends on their salary, their titles, and the constant praise of their peers, living like birds that have become so accustomed to their golden cages that they have completely forgotten how to fly in the open sky. A major loss is a sudden, sharp opening of the cage door, a painful but necessary awakening that forces you to stretch your wings, to trust your inherent strength, and to discover the magnificent freedom of relying entirely on your own internal resources. It is like a pearl oyster that lives at the dark, cold bottom of the deep ocean, spending its days resting quietly in the sand, completely content with its simple, protected life inside its hard, thick shell. One day, a sharp, irritating grain of rough sand slips inside its shell, piercing its soft, sensitive body, causing an intense, constant discomfort and a deep pain that it cannot escape or throw out into the sea. Instead of dying of despair, instead of complaining about its tragic fate, the oyster begins to secrete a beautiful, smooth substance called nacre around the irritating grain, wrapping the source of its pain in layer upon layer of pure, luminous beauty over many long years. Through this slow, patient process of total acceptance and creative transformation, the painful piece of dirt is slowly turned into a magnificent, priceless pearl of radiant white light, a treasure that is sought after by the entire world, a symbol of absolute perfection that would never have existed without the initial trauma of the rough sand. Your current financial difficulties, your emotional heartbreaks, and your shattered dreams are that rough grain of sand, and your only task right now is to wrap them in the beautiful nacre of your patience, your mindfulness, and your deep compassion, turning your personal suffering into a priceless pearl of wisdom that will illuminate your entire life. True peace can never be found by trying to eliminate all difficulties from your path, because life is an unpredictable, ever-changing landscape where the weather can shift from a bright sunrise to a roaring storm in a single hour, completely beyond your control. The only real safety in this world is to develop a mind that is like a massive, heavy ship floating on the deep ocean, a vessel that is so stable, so well balanced, and so deeply anchored that it can ride over the most terrifying, giant waves without capsizing, carrying its passengers safely to the shore regardless of the fury of the tempest. You develop this inner stability by learning to observe your thoughts and emotions with absolute detachment, recognizing that they are merely temporary fluctuations of energy, not the truth of who you are. There was an old, wise master who lived in a small hermitage on the top of a windswept mountain, and he was known across many provinces for his extraordinary ability to stay perfectly calm and joyful during times of severe famine, political wars, and personal illnesses. A young, eager scholar climbed up the steep mountain path to visit him, wanting to know the secret phrase or the secret meditation technique that allowed him to maintain such an unshakable state of peace in a world full of endless trouble and chaos. The old master looked at the young man with eyes full of deep, playful humor, took a sip of fresh water from his wooden bowl, and replied that his entire secret consisted of a very simple practice, which was that when he walks, when he eats, and when he sleeps, he sleeps. The young scholar looked at him in total bewilderment, feeling disappointed and a bit angry, stating that every ordinary person in the village walks, eats, and sleeps every single day, and asking how such a common routine could be the key to ultimate spiritual freedom. The master smiled gently, shook his head, and explained that when the ordinary people of the world walk, their minds are already running to the marketplace, worrying about their debts or regretting their past mistakes, and when they eat, they are planning their next business deal, and when they sleep, they are troubled by endless dreams of fear and ambition. He explained that by keeping his mind perfectly unified with his physical body in the immediate present, he remained completely free from the illusions of time, allowing the pure, unadulterated joy of existence to flow through him in every single second without any obstruction. This beautiful simplicity is the exact medicine that your soul needs right now as you navigate the challenging process of rebuilding your life from the ground up, for you must learn to give up the exhausting habit of living in your head, and learn to live deeply in your immediate reality. When you are looking for a new path, when you are balancing your limited finances, or when you are performing a simple task around your room, let your entire consciousness merge completely with that action, doing it with absolute precision, neatness, and love. Do not let your mind drift into dark thoughts of what you used to have. Do not let it tremble with anxiety about what will happen next month. Simply be the absolute master of this current step, knowing that the future is nothing more than a series of present moments handled with wisdom and grace. Losing everything allows you to cultivate a very rare, beautiful quality known as spiritual humility, which is the total dissolution of the false pride, the arrogance, and the subtle vanity that usually creep into the heart when a person is successful and wealthy. When you have a lot of money and power, the ego naturally begins to believe that it is superior to others, that its success is due entirely to its own brilliance, and that those who are struggling are simply lazy or foolish, creating a hard, cold barrier of separation between yourself and the rest of humanity. But when you are brought down to the absolute earth by a great crisis, that hard shell of pride is completely shattered, and you are suddenly able to look at every living being with eyes of absolute equality, deep empathy, and profound respect. Think of a grand, heavy ear of golden rice growing in a beautiful, green field under the warmth of the summer sun, a plant that has spent months absorbing the nutrients of the soil, the water of the rain, and the light of the sky. When the rice grain is young, light, and empty inside, it stands completely straight, pointing its sharp head proudly up into the air as if it were the king of the field, looking down on the humble grass below with contempt. But as the grain matures, as it becomes filled with the rich, heavy flower of life, it naturally begins to bow its head down toward the dark earth, bending lower and lower in a beautiful gesture of absolute humility, knowing that its true value does not lie in standing tall, but in offering its life to nourish the world. Your current experience of loss is that process of ripening, a painful but beautiful transformation that is emptying you of the light, hollow pride of the ego and filling you with the heavy, rich flower of true wisdom, compassion, and spiritual maturity. You no longer need to stand straight and proud to prove your worth to society. You can bow your head gracefully to the reality of life, accepting your situation with a quiet, dignified strength that inspires everyone who looks at you. You find that by becoming small in the eyes of the world, you become immensely vast in the eyes of the truth, a person whose heart is so spacious that it can hold the joys and sorrows of all living beings without any effort. In the timeless records of the early spiritual seekers, there is a touching account of an old woman named Purna, who had spent her entire youth working as a slave in a wealthy household, enduring decades of hard labor, cruel insults, and extreme poverty, with no family to support her and no possessions to call her own. When she became too old to work, she was cast out into the streets with nothing but a torn, dirty rag to cover her frail body, reduced to begging for food at the city gates and sleeping under a leaking wooden porch during the cold winter nights. Despite her absolute lack of material comfort, her heart was filled with a deep, inexplicable sense of inner peace, and whenever she managed to receive a small crust of bread or a handful of boiled rice, she would always share half of it with the birds or the stray dogs before tasting a single bite herself. One day, the enlightened master was walking through the city gates with his disciples, surrounded by a massive crowd of wealthy merchants and noble kings who were offering him grand gifts of golden coins, fine silks, and beautiful mountain property to show their devotion. Purna stood at the very edge of the crowd, looking at the radiant countenance of the master with tears of pure joy in her eyes, wishing with all her soul that she had something beautiful to offer him, but finding nothing in her small cloth bag except a tiny, half-eaten piece of dry, stale bread that she had begged for that morning. With a heart trembling with humility and love, she stepped forward through the crowd of rich nobles, fell to her knees at the master's feet, and offered him the dry crust of bread, apologizing with a soft, weeping voice for the extreme poverty of her gift. The Buddha looked at the old, wrinkled woman with eyes full of boundless, unconditional love, ignored all the grand treasures of gold and silk offered by the kings, and reached out both hands to accept the dry crust of bread with the utmost reverence and respect, eating it completely before the amazed eyes of the crowd. He turned to his disciples and declared that the old woman's gift was the greatest, most precious offering he had received that day, because while the kings had given a small fraction of their vast surplus wealth without any personal sacrifice, this humble woman had given absolutely everything she had to live on, offering her entire life in a single gesture of pure, unconditional devotion. This beautiful narrative teaches everyone that the true value of your life is never determined by the quantity of what you possess, but by the quality of love, purity, and selflessness that you bring to the present moment, a value that remains completely untouched by your financial status. When you can look at your life through this beautiful spiritual lens, you stop measuring your progress by how much money you have recovered or how fast you are rebuilding your career, and you begin to measure it by how much gentleness, peace, and forgiveness you can bring to your daily interactions. You realize that the ultimate success in this human journey is not to become a wealthy tycoon or a famous celebrity, but to become a completely free, unburdened soul, a person who can walk through the fires of life without getting burned, and who can stand in the middle of a total loss with a heart that is full of gratitude and love. You understand that everything that happens to you, whether it manifests as a pleasant wind or a harsh storm, is a perfect, custom-made lesson designed by the intelligence of the universe to help your consciousness expand and awaken to its true nature. To find peace after a devastating experience, it is absolutely essential to cultivate a deep, regular habit of inner silence, creating a quiet space in your daily life where you can disconnect from the constant chatter of the world and connect with the permanent stillness of your soul. You do not need to go to a remote mountain cave or an expensive retreat center to find this silence. You can find it right in your own room, simply by sitting quietly for a few minutes each day, closing your eyes, relaxing your body, and letting your mind settle into its natural state of peaceful awareness. Look at your thoughts as if they were fish swimming through a clear, calm pond, observing them pass by without trying to catch them, without getting angry at them, and without following them into the dark waters of worry or regret. As you rest in this beautiful inner silence, you will notice a strange, miraculous phenomenon taking place, for you will find that beneath the turbulent surface of your mind, there lives an ocean of deep, radiant joy that has absolutely nothing to do with your external life. This joy does not depend on your health, it does not depend on your money, and it does not depend on what people think of you. It is the very fabric of your consciousness, the natural state of your being when it is free from the heavy burdens of desire and fear. When you can connect with this inner fountain of joy, you become completely independent of the conditions of the world, knowing that you carry the ultimate treasure inside your own chest, a treasury that can never be exhausted and can never be stolen by any misfortune. There was an ancient, beautiful parable about a poor beggar who lived in a small village, sitting on a rusted, old iron box at the side of the road for over 30 years, holding out his wooden bowl to every passing traveler, begging for a few copper coins to buy a simple piece of bread. He spent his entire life in a state of chronic lack, shivering in the winter cold, sweating in the summer heat, his face lined with sorrow and his body bent with the heavy weight of his daily struggle for survival. One day, a wise, wandering teacher walked down that path, and instead of throwing a coin into the bowl, he stopped, looked at the old beggar with a deep, penetrating gaze, and asked him what was inside the iron box he had been sitting on for all those decades. The beggar looked surprised, shook his head, and replied that there was absolutely nothing inside it, stating that it was just an old piece of junk he had found on the road a long time ago, using it merely as a convenient seat to rest his tired body while he begged for money. The wise teacher insisted that he should open the box and look inside, and with a skeptical, impatient sigh, the beggar managed to pry open the rusted lid with a sharp stone, breaking the ancient seal that had held it shut for over 30 years. As the lid flew open, his eyes widened in absolute shock, his breath stopped, and tears of pure, overwhelming joy ran down his wrinkled cheeks, for the box was filled to the absolute brim with magnificent, glittering bars of pure gold, a massive fortune that could have made him the richest man in the kingdom throughout his entire life. He had spent 30 years living as a miserable, starving beggar, pleading with strangers for a few worthless copper coins, without ever realizing that he was sitting directly on top of an infinite treasury that belonged entirely to him from the very beginning. This powerful parable is a perfect description of the modern human condition, for everyone is running around the world like a desperate beggar, pleading with external things, with money, with status, with relationships, and with possessions to give them a small drop of happiness and security. They do not realize that they are already sitting on top of the ultimate treasury of existence, which is the pure, radiant light of their own inner consciousness, a magnificent source of peace and joy that is always right here, always full, and always waiting to be discovered. When you lose everything in the physical world, it is often the exact moment when you are forced to stop looking outward for happiness and finally open the rusted lid of your own inner box, discovering the pure gold of your true spiritual identity. You realize that you do not need to beg the world for approval, you do not need to scare yourself with thoughts of lack, and you do not need to live in a state of permanent anxiety about your survival, for you are already a deeply rich, magnificent manifestation of life itself. The loss of your material possessions is merely the removal of the false trinkets that were distracting you from seeing your true wealth, allowing you to step into a life that is completely grounded in reality, simplicity, and unshakable peace. As you step forward into the beautiful, unwritten chapters of your future, let this profound truth be your guiding light, allowing your heart to remain perfectly open, your mind perfectly still, and your steps perfectly steady on the path of wisdom and love. Do not let the shadows of the past darken the radiant freshness of the present moment, do not let the fears of tomorrow disturb the quiet serenity of your breathing, simply trust the intelligent, beautiful unfolding of your destiny with a gentle smile of complete acceptance. You are fully capable of rebuilding your life on a foundation that is far deeper, truer, and more beautiful than anything you lost, creating a reality that is a magnificent testament to the indestructible power of the human spirit when it is aligned with Dharma. Breathe in the cool, fresh air of this very second, letting it fill your entire body with vitality and strength, and breathe out all the remaining traces of regret, anger, and anxiety, letting them melt away into the vast silence of the universe like smoke in the wind. You are safe, you are whole, and you are profoundly loved by the entire cosmos, a participant in a grand, magical dance of consciousness that is always supporting your growth, your healing, and your ultimate spiritual liberation. Keep your heart soft, keep your words kind, keep your awareness clear, and let the beautiful light of your peaceful soul shine out brightly, magnificently, and radiantly into the world, transforming every dark valley into a beautiful garden of wisdom and peace.